Good morning, everyone. In the last session, we completed our discussion related to Spring Boot. So what is a Spring Boot? How to create project by using Spring Boot, and how to represent Java class as a Spring Bean, right? How to perform dependency injection. What is a setter injection, constructor injection, field injection? What is a Spring Bean? What is bean scope? What is bean lifecycle? What is auto wiring? What is a banner in the Spring Boot? What is a runner in the Spring Boot? And what is auto configuration? What are the advantages of using Spring Boot? All those topics we learned in the previous sessions. From today onwards, we are going to understand new concept, that is Spring Data JPA. Spring Data JPA is used to develop persistence layer. Okay, so we are having application with layered architecture. So multiple layers will be available in our application. So one is presentation layer, web layer, business layer, and persistence layer. So to develop persistence layer, there are several options available. JDBC available, Spring JDBC available, Hibernate available, Spring ORM available, Spring Data JPA also available. So currently we are going for Spring Data JPA in order to develop persistence layer, right? Data JPA supports ORM features. It is supporting ORM features. What is the meaning of ORM? ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping. ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping. So ORM is used to represent our data in the form of one object. So when you go for JDBC, if you want to insert a record, insert into table values, some values you need to write like this. If you want to insert one record into the table, you need to deal with the data in the text format when you go for JDBC. If you want to retrieve the records from the table, then you will write one select query, select a star from table. So when you want to represent data in the JDBC, we will go for a text format. When you retrieve the data, again it will return in the form of text format. So we need to represent the data in the form of object. So to represent data in the object format, we are going for ORM. ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping. Using ORM, we can represent our data in the form of objects. That means, so when we are developing an application using Java, Java is object-oriented programming language. In the Java, everything will be represented as a object. So when you submit the form, for example, if you go here, if you take one layered architecture, UI presentation layer will be available, controller layer available, service layer available, persistence layer is available, and here our database is available. Good. Now here user will communicate with our application using user interface. Here controller will be available for our application, which will take the request from the UI and will provide the response to the UI. Controller will communicate with the service in our application where business logic will be available. Service will communicate with the DAO in our application, which will communicate with the database. Now user will communicate with the UI, will fill the form. When user fill the form, that UI will send the data to controller. Then controller should send the data to service. Service should send the data to DAO. Data will send the DAO will send the data to database. Now, when user fill the data in the form, it will come to the controller request that get parameter. We are going to capture form data. So my form contains 10 fields. My form contains 10 fields. Will you take a method with 10 parameters, or you will take one object as a method parameter? My form is having 10 fields. I want to pass 10 fields data from controller to service. So is it recommended to write a method, save user, int ID, string name, string gender, okay, long phone number? Is it recommended to write 20 parameters for the method like this? or it is recommended to write one method with the object as a parameter, which is recommended. So we want to send the data from the UI to controller. Controller should send the data to service. So UI having a form is having 10 fields. 10 fields data I captured in the controller. Controller should call the service. Inside the service, I am writing a method save user id name. So like this here, I want to pass parameters id name, gender, phone number, city, state, country, job, experience, something like this. I'm capturing some data from the user. I want to send the data from the controller to service. So here we can write a method with multiple parameters. We can write a method with one object as a parameter. Which one is recommended? Object is recommended, because tomorrow if my form is having 20 fields, taking 20 parameters for the method is not recommended. As per the industry standard, method should contain up to 7 parameters only. If your method is taking more than 7 parameters, you are violating code review concept. So in the industry, we will do the code review. Best practices we need to follow. A method should contain less than 7 parameters. If it is having more than 7 parameters, in the code review, you will get a bug in your code, right? So always we need to transfer the data from one layer to another layer in the form of object. Now, whatever the object we are getting, that object I want to store in the data. The object data I want to store in the table. In my table, there are records available. I need to retrieve the records from the table. So whatever the records available in the table, every record I want to represent as one object. Earlier, we executed select query. We got the result set. We need to get the data from the result set. We need to convert the data into object. But now you no need to do all that work. Everything will be taken care by data JPA. What is the main purpose of data JPA? Data JPA is used to develop persistence layer. This data JPA supports ORM features. What is the meaning of ORM? ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping. Using ORM, we can represent our data in the form of object. One object represents one row in table. One object represents one row in table. So now when we are going for this ORM, we need to map our Java class with the database table. If you want to represent your data in the form of object, we need to map our Java class to database table. We need to map our Java class to database table. So how we are going to map it? Now see, I'm having one table. Assume that I'm having one table. So the table is some book details. Table is available book details. In this table, I have book underscore ID, which is integer parameter, and next one book underscore name, which is varchar data type. Then book price is available, ID, name, and price. So this is some integer type. So like this, I'm taking one table. Okay. So now I want to perform operations with the table. To perform operations with the table, I don't want to write SQL queries. I want to go for data JPA. So in the data JPA, we can represent our data in the form of objects. If I want to insert a record, I will give one object to insert. My object will contain data. I want to retrieve the records. I want to retrieve the records in the form of object. I can retrieve one record or I can retrieve multiple records also. So to represent our data in the form of object, so this data JPA should know which class object is mapped to which database table. In the database, multiple tables will be available. You want to insert the record into which table? You want to retrieve the records from the which table? So you need to represent one Java class which is mapped with the database table. Object relational mapping. So the process of mapping Java class to database table is called object relational mapping. Now I'm going to take one class here. The class name is book. Class name is book. Inside this class, I will take variables, integer book ID, string book name, and integer book price. Okay, integer book price. So like this, I'm taking three variables inside the Java class. Now I have one table in the database. To perform operations with the table in the form of objects, we need to map our Java class with the database table. To map our Java class with the database table, first class name will be mapped to table name. To map our class name with the table name, first of all, our class which is a mapping to the database table is called as entity class. The Java class which is a mapped to the database table is called entity class. How to represent Java class as an entity? By using @entity annotation. To represent Java class as a entity, we will use @entity. To represent Java class as a Spring Bean, @component available. So to represent Java class as an entity, @entity annotation is available. Then I want to map my Java class with the table name. So to map our Java class with the table name, we will use @table annotation. But here, writing this table annotation not mandatory. Writing the table annotation not mandatory, but writing entity annotation is a mandatory. What is the purpose of entity? What is the purpose of entity? The Java class which is mapped to the database table is called as entity. To represent Java class as the entity class, we will go for @entity annotation. Next one, I want to map my class with the table name. So to map the class with the table name, we will use @table annotation. Here, table annotation is optional. Table annotation is optional. If I don't write the table annotation, Java class name will match with the table name. That means if your class name and table name, suppose if the table name is book, my class name is also book, table name is also book, then this class will be mapped with that table. Okay. If your class name, table name both are same, then table annotation is optional. If your class name and table name are different, then you need to write @table to map this class with this table. So two annotations as of now. One is @entity, second one is @table. What is the purpose of @entity? What is the purpose of @entity? The Java class which is mapped with database table is called as entity class. To represent Java class as an entity, we will use @entity annotation. Next one, my class name and table name both are different. If a class name, table name both are different, to map a class with the table, we will use @table annotation. Are you clear? Now, in every table from now onwards, we are going to use primary key. For every table, primary key will be available to maintain unique data. To maintain unique data, we will maintain primary key. Now, the Java class variable will be mapped with the primary key column in the table. So to map our variable with the primary key column, we will use @ID annotation. What is the meaning of ID? ID will represent in our Java class which variable is mapped to primary key column in the table. ORM nothing but class name will be mapped with the table name. Variable names will be mapped with the column names. Object relational mapping. Why we need to map like this? I don't want to write the SQL queries. I want to insert the record, update the record, retrieve the record in the form of object. So which object I want to insert? I have a employee object. Employee object having the data. This employee object data should be stored into which database table. That's why mapping is required. Java class will be mapped with the database table. That is called object relational mapping. So class name will be mapped with the table name. Variable names will be mapped with the column names. Now here to represent a class as a entity, @entity annotation. To map a class name with the table name, @table annotation. To represent which variable is mapped to primary key column, for that @id. Then next one, to map other column names and variable names, we can use one annotation called @column. What is that? @column. What is the purpose of @column? To map our variable name with the column name in the table. To map variable name with the column name. But here column annotation is also optional. If your variable name is matching with the column name in the table, column annotation is also optional. So if you see, there are entity annotation, table, ID, column. 4 annotations are available. Out of these 4, entity and ID are mandatory. If you want to work with the data JPA, you need to create one entity class. The class which is mapped to database table is called entity class. So to represent that as an entity annotation is mandatory, and ID annotation is also mandatory. What is the purpose of ID? What is the purpose of ID? Come on, guys. ID is used to specify. ID is used to specify which variable is mapped to which column in the table. That is a primary key column. Then non-primary key columns will be available. To map our variables with the columns, @column annotation. If I don't write the column annotation, variable name will be same as column name. If I don't write @table annotation, class name will be same as table name. Are you clear with this one? Good. So data JPA we are using. So data JPA is used to develop persistence layer. Using this data JPA, we can communicate with the database table. So to communicate with the table, we need to map our Java class to database table. The Java class which is mapped to DB table. The Java class which is mapped to DB table is called as entity class. The Java class which is mapped to DB table is called as entity class. We will use below annotations in entity class. We will use below annotations in entity class. What is the first one? @entity. Next one, @table. Third one, @id. Fourth one, @column. So what is entity? What is entity? Represent Java class as entity class. Okay. @table map Java class name to DB table name. So it is optional. If I don't write it, what will happen? Class name will be taken as a table name. @id to represent primary key column mapped variable. Primary key column mapped variable. What is @column? To map entity class variable to map entity class variable to DB table column. This is also optional. If I don't write the column, variable name will be same as column name. Clear? Good. So read this once again. We are talking about data JPA that is used to develop persistence layer. It supports ORM features. ORM stands for object relational mapping. Using ORM, we can represent our data in the form of objects. Nothing but save record using object. Okay. Update record using object. Retrieve record in the form of object. Delete record using object. Delete record using object. Retrieve records in the form of objects. So everything will be represented in the form of object when you go for ORM. So one object represents one row in the DB table. If I create one object, it represents one row in the database table. we need to map our Java class to database table. So which is called as entity class. The Java class which is mapped to DB table is called as entity class. Now to represent our class as an entity, we will use below annotations: @entity, @table, @id, @column. Entity, make our class as an entity class. It is mandatory annotation. Okay, next one, table. Map the class name to table name. If a class name, table name both are same, then table annotation not required. @id, map it with the primary key column. This is also mandatory. @column, to map entity class variable to DB table column. So this is also optional. If your table name and column name both are same, then this annotation is also optional. Are you clear? I have given one video. Did you try developing data JPA application by using Oracle database? 8 minutes video I have given in the YouTube, in the WhatsApp group. Anybody tried? No. You tried working? Let's do that application development. Guys, self-learning is very, very important. So today I am here to explain all the programs, all the concepts. I will inject the subject into your brain. But once you go to the job, nobody will tell you. So whatever that you are learning, there is no guarantee that you will work on the same technology in the project. So once you go to the company, you need to be flexible as per the company requirement. Today you are learning Spring Boot microservices. Tomorrow, if your project is not using Spring Boot, then if they are using some different framework, if they ask you to change your domain, so always you need to be flexible and you need to improve self-learning. Okay, so you should not be dependent on someone to learn the subject. That is the first rule. So we will show you the path how to learn the subject, and we will explain some topics. We will explain some examples also. But end of the day, you need to do lot of research and you need to learn the subject. So if you start learning the subject on your own, you can survive in the IT industry, in any company, in any project. So I will tell you, initially when I joined as a Java developer, after 1 year, they asked me to work on the testing. Can I say that I don't know testing? If I say I don't know testing, go out. We will recruit a person who knows the testing. 6 months, they have given me work on testing with the Selenium. You know Selenium, automation testing. It is Java framework. Selenium is a Java framework. If you know core Java, then you can work with the Selenium. 6 months they have given task to me on the Selenium. I can't say no. If I say no, I will lose my job, right? So as per project requirement, as per company requirement, we need to do that. In my current project, they are asking me to work on AWS cloud. I cannot say that I don't know AWS. I have to learn the AWS. I have to work with the AWS. From the last 3 years, I'm working with AWS in my project. They asked me to work on DevOps to deploy the application. So full stack developer. We need to write the code. We need to test the code. We need to deploy the code. We need to deliver the code to the client. End-to-end involvement is required. If you say, I'm a only Java developer, I will only write the Java logic. It is not accepted in the industry. So if you want to survive in the industry, you need to become all-rounder. You need to become all-rounder. You should know front-end development, back-end development, DevOps tools, cloud computing also, testing also. Because in the company, depends on the project requirement, they will change the task for you. This month, task will be there on the Java. Next month, maybe on the testing, maybe on the deployment, maybe on the cloud computing. We don't know. So currently people are following agile methodology in the company. Agile methodology means plan will be prepared only for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, what task we are going to get, we don't know. So every company following agile methodology to develop the project. When we are going for agile methodology, For 2 weeks only the planning will be available. Next 2 weeks, what we need to do. After 2 weeks completed, again planning will be available. Again planning will be available. For every 2 weeks, the game will change. So for first 2 weeks, if you get Java, next 2 weeks, you may get a testing task. And next 2 weeks, you may get the R&D task. R&D means in the research. Currently, in our project, Angular we are using. Manager will ask you, why only Angular? Why not React? Do some R&D on the React.js and tell me which is better for our project with some proof. That is called proof of concept. So in the company, when there is no task, you need to develop a POC, proof of concept. Whatever the task you are doing or whatever the research you are doing, you need to prove why it is recommended, why it is not recommended. Currently, our project is developing by using Spring Boot and we are running our project by using Docker. They may give you task. Why don't we use Kubernetes? Let us do POC on the Kubernetes. So you need to learn the Kubernetes. You need to deploy the project using Kubernetes. You need to show them this is how we need to work with the Kubernetes. These are the pros. These are the cons with the Kubernetes. POC you need to develop. And they may ask you to do some research on the DevOps tools. Suppose if you are using AWS cloud, they may ask you to research on the Azure cloud. Why only AWS? Why not Azure? What is benefit with AWS, which is not there in the Azure? So you need to analyze. You need to prepare a PPT. You need to give the presentation to your team members, your manager, your team lead, your scrum master. So sometimes if there is no work in the project, they will give you that kind of R&D work. And sometimes they will ask you to take some trainings in the company. In our project, some freshers will come. For freshers, training we need to give. Training means not Amirpet kind of training. Java, within 5 days we need to complete. Spring Boot, within 2 days we need to complete. AWS, 1 day. So training will be completed. They need to work on the project. For that, you need to prepare the plan. If any fresher, college fresher came to the project, we need to complete the training in 2 weeks of time. Daily 2 hours, 2 weeks training will be available. They need to work on the project. So tomorrow, if they ask you to change the technology, currently you are working as a Java developer, they will ask you to work on the AWS. Some companies will give you training on the AWS for 1 week. Some companies will not give training on the technology. They will give you Udemy license. You need to go through Udemy. You need to watch some videos. You need to learn and you need to use in the project. So whatever the training you are taking in the Amirpet, you should not habituate to this kind of training. Everything is spoon feeding here. We are teaching the concept, we are repeating, explaining an example, line by line coding, asking you to reverse explain the topic, whatever you understood. It will be there only in the Amirpet, not in the high-tech city. So in the high-tech city, any technology, within 1 week you have to learn. And nobody will take the classes for you. You need to learn on your own with your research and analysis. So self-learning is very important. You need to try developing the projects on your own. Keep that in your mind. And don't stick to one technology. If you stick to one technology, you cannot survive in the software industry. You need to have experience with multiple technologies. Then only you will have a job in the IT. Otherwise, you will lose your job. So currently you are learning Java. Once you get the job on the Java technology, don't align yourself to only Java. Learn some front-end technologies, learn databases, learn cloud, learn the Docker and Kubernetes, learn DevOps tools. You need to make yourself as an all-rounder so that you will have more demand in the project. You will have more demand in the company. And if you have knowledge on multiple technologies, if you have complete picture on the project development life cycle, from development to till deployment, there is a chance of getting on-site opportunity. If you have more knowledge on the project, then company will send you to on-site for the client location. If you go to on-site, you will get salary in the dollars. If your salary is 1 lakh here, if you go to on-site, you will get 4 to 5 lakhs per month. They will provide your flight ticket. They will provide your accommodation. They will provide hotels. Everything will be free. salary you will get in the dollars per hour. $50, $60 salary will be there. In the India, monthly salary. In the US, hourly salary will be available. So to go to that on-site, you need to be expert in the project. You need to know each and everything in the project, each and every technology that is used in the project. Not only development, from the requirements to till delivery. If you have the idea, then you will get that on-site opportunity. Do you know any friends who went to on-site? No? You have friends, all right? So for 3 months or for 6 months, for 2 years, people will go to on-site. Depends on the subject they have, depends on knowledge they have in the project. So don't stick to only Java. You need to make yourself as all-rounder. Then only you can survive in the IT. Good. So we are trying to understand how to develop our first application by using Spring Data JPA. Okay, so first step, guys, first we need to go for DB setup. I have given the video to set up database in our system. So I'm using DB server. I'm using DB server as MySQL. My DB server is MySQL. You can use Oracle also. My DB client I'm using as MySQL Workbench. DB server is MySQL. DB client is MySQL Workbench. That is the first step. Let me go to my Workbench. How to install the database, how to set up the Workbench, I have given a short video also. Right. Let me create one connection. Connection name 36 Sbms. So host, local host, it is running in the same machine. Username and password. I forgot my password. This is my password. Ashok ID @123. Store in the vault password. Okay. Test connection. It is successful. Okay. So with this, I created one connection 36 Sbms. Now let us go for show databases. So currently there are some databases available. Show databases. Yeah, there are some databases available. I want to create one new database. Create a database Sbms 36. This is my database name. Create database Sbms 36. Database is created. Then use Sbms 36. I'm using this database. Perfect. So this is a brand new database that we are using, right? So MySQL database is available, and in that MySQL, I'm checking what are the databases available. I have created one new database called Sbms 36, and I am using that database. Then go to show tables. Go to show tables, run this. So here currently we don't have any table because it is a brand new database. So with this, database setup is ready. Show tables, no, nothing. Connect with Workbench. Create connection in the Workbench. Create DB connection in Workbench and execute below queries to create database. Right? So once it is created, now develop our application. First application development, data JPA application development. The very first step, create the boot application by using JPA starter. So along with the JPA starter, we need to add driver also. I want to communicate with MySQL database. For that, we need MySQL driver. Create boot app with below dependencies. First one is JPA starter, data JPA starter. Second one is MySQL driver. If you are using Oracle database, then you need to add the Oracle driver. Then second step, configure data source properties. configure data source properties in application.properties file. So when you configure data source properties in the properties file, boot will load those properties, will load the driver, will create the connection pool also. You no need to do anything. You just create the project with JPA starter and you add properties, data source properties in the properties file. Once it is done, then let us create entity class. Let us create entity class and map with a DB table. Create entity class and map with entity table. Entity class with the database table. What is entity class? What is entity class? The Java class which is mapped with the database table is called as entity class. How to represent Java class as a entity? At the rate entity. Then the fourth point here, create repository interface by extending JPA repositories. Create repository interface by extending JPA repositories. In order to perform operations with the database, you no need to write the queries. So JPA provided predefined methods. So we just need to call the methods which are provided by JPA. We no need to write any logic for that. We just need to create one. I have shown you in the demo session. With one line, we can perform operations with the database. That one line is repository interface. We need to create repository interface by extending the properties from JPA repository. Then get repository bean object, get repository bean object and a test repository methods using start class. That's it. So if you want to develop one application by using data JPA, these are the 5 standard steps we are going to follow. So first one, DB setup. Server I am using as MySQL. You can use Oracle also, no problem. To communicate with the MySQL, I'm using MySQL Workbench. Then I created one new database in the MySQL with a name Sbms 36. Then I want to develop my application. First, I am creating a boot application with below dependencies. Then my boot application should communicate with the database. With which database it has to communicate? That database properties I will configure in the properties file. Then I want to communicate with the table by using ORM. So I will create one Java class. I will map that Java class with the database table. The Java class which is mapped with the table is called as entity. Then create the repository interface by extending JPA repository. Why we need to extend from the JPA repository? Predefined methods available. I don't want to write my own logic to communicate with the table. I want to go with the predefined methods. Those are predefined methods given by data JPA repository. Then once our repository is ready, we just need to get the repository object and we need to test the methods given by JPA repository to perform operations with the table. Are you clear? Good. Now let us go here, create a project, file, new, Spring Starter project 07 data JPA application 1. Data JPA application 1. Click on next. Dependencies. So what dependencies are required now? One is data JPA starter, Spring Data JPA, and the next one MySQL driver. So you select these two dependencies. One is the JPA starter, second one is MySQL driver. Next, finish. Now you can see boot application created. with starter data JPA and MySQL connector. MySQL driver is available as a dependency. Data JPA also available as a dependency. Now, first step is completed. Then second one, properties file. So here we need to configure our data source properties. What is our URL? What is our username? What is our password? We need to specify. To configure that, control space spring dot data source dot username. Spring dot data source dot username. What is our database username? Then spring dot data source dot password. Our database password. Spring dot data source dot password is equal to some value at the rate 123. Next one, URL. Spring dot data source dot URL. Spring dot data source dot jdbc dot URL or normal URL. Spring dot data source dot URL. So our data source URL we are getting. Okay. MySQL URL, database name is different. Right. Our database name is Sbms 36. Right. So we are configuring username, password, URL. Driver class optional. Even if you don't configure, driver jar is available. It will load the driver class. Okay, good. So once it is done, our project is created. Our properties also configured. What is the next step? Entity class with the table mapping. New class in.ashokid.entity. I'm taking a class with a name called book. Inside this class, let us write the variables. Private integer book ID, private string book name, private integer book price. You can take double also, no problem. Private integer book ID, book name and book price. So take it as a double book price. It is a normal Java class now. I want to make this class as a entity class. How to make this class as a entity? By using @entity. By using @entity. In the book table, I want book ID as a primary key. So this variable is mapped with a primary key column. This variable is mapped with primary key column. What about table and column annotations? Table and column mandatory or optional? If I don't write the table, then what will happen? If I don't write the table, then what will happen? Class name will be considered as a table name. If I don't write the column, variable name will be considered as a column name. Right. Now I am not writing them. Okay. I'm using only entity and ID. To represent Java class as the entity, @entity annotation. To map our variable with the primary key column, then we are going for @ID annotation. @ID annotation. Are you clear? Very good. Once it is done, what is the next step? Create the repository interface by extending JPA repository. In the JPA, there are two types of repositories available. One is called CRUD repository. Second one is called JPA repository. One is called CRUD repository. Second one is called JPA repository. When you go for JPA repository, more features will be available. Okay. In the data JPA, there are two types of repositories available. One is called CRUD repository. Second one is called JPA repository. Are you clear with this? So by using CRUD repository, we can communicate with the database. By using JPA repository also, we can communicate with the database. What is the difference? CRUD repository and JPA repository, when you compare, JPA repository having more features than CRUD repository. JPA repository having more features than CRUD repository. But currently, I'm going with CRUD repository. Once you got the basic idea, then we will go for JPA repository also. Are you able to follow this? Good. Now, I have created one entity class and I mapped my entity class with the database table. then I need to create one repository interface by extending JPA repository. I have CRUD repository and I have JPA repository. We will create only interface, guys. Implementation is not our responsibility. Implementation will be taken care by data JPA. Let me create one repository, new interface, keep that in the repo package. Instead of calling as a DAO, we are calling as a repository. DAO means which contains persistence logic. We should write our own logic. Repository means we no need to write any logic. Logic will be provided by JPA. You just call the methods which are given by the JPA. Now I'm naming this as book repository. Book repository. My book repository is going to extend from CRUD repository. It will extend from CRUD repository. What is a CRUD repository? Come on. What is a CRUD repository? CRUD repository is an interface given by data JPA. It is used to perform CRUD operations with the database table. You no need to write your own logic. There are predefined methods available. You call those predefined methods to perform the operation. You call the methods provided by the CRUD repository. One interface extending the properties from another interface. So here, whatever the methods available in the CRUD repository, all those methods we can access in the book repository also. Subclass can access superclass methods. Subinterface can access superinterface methods. Book repository extending from CRUD repository. Inside the CRUD repository, there are 11 methods available. So if you go to CRUD repository, there are several methods available. By using these methods, we can perform operation with the database table. You no need to write any query. You no need to write any implementation. Nothing is required. Everything will be taken care by data JPA. We just create the interface and we extend the properties from CRUD repository. So this repository should communicate with which table? Book repository is available. This book repository should communicate with which table? Book table. Book table mapped with which class? Book entity class. So you need to specify entity type here. You need to specify entity type here. Now guys, when you go for the book, be careful. There is a predefined class in the AWT package also. Packages, you need to be careful. You need to import our package, not AWT package. If you import AWT package, your application will fail. So I'm importing my package for the book class, right? So interface book repository extending from CRUD repository. Book repository is an interface to perform operation with the table. With which table? Based on the entity class. I'm giving my entity. What is the primary key data type in the entity? That is the ID. What is ID data type? You go to book. What is ID data type? Integer. So that's why I'm specifying that integer. That's it. Our persistence layer development is completed. Do I need to do anything? No. With this logic now, first of all, any logic available? No. Whatever the interface I have created, with this interface, I can insert the record, I can update the record, I can retrieve the record, I can delete the record, I can see how many records available in the table, I can check whether my table is empty or not, I can perform all CRUD operations with the table without writing single method. I can perform all CRUD operations with the table without writing single method. That is the beauty of Spring Data JPA. You no need to write anything. You just create one entity class and you create one repository interface. The remaining game will be taken care by Data JPA. Are you able to follow this? Good. So let me write this interface once again. I want to create one repository interface. What is the purpose of entity in the data JPA? What is the purpose of entity in the data JPA? What is the purpose of entity in the data JPA? The Java class which is mapped with the database table is called as a entity class. What annotations we are using to make our class as a entity? @entity annotation. Next one, @id. What is entity? What is id? What is entity? What is id? Entity is used to represent our Java class as a entity class. What is @id? To represent which variable is mapping with the primary key column in the table. What is a primary key? Not null plus unique. It is a constraint in the database. That column should not have null value. That column should have unique values. Right. Next one. What is a repository? What is repository, guys? Repository is used to perform operations with the table. How to create the repository in the JPA? By extending JPA repositories. JPA provided two repositories for us. One is CRUD repository. Second one is JPA repository. CRUD repository, JPA repository, which is having more functionality? JPA repository. Now tell me how to create the repository in the JPA. Public interface book repository. Is it sufficient? If I create my repository like this, it is a marker repository. No methods available. Any use of that? Marker interface. This is called as a marker interface. In the Java we discussed what is a marker interface. What is a marker interface? Come on. The interface which does not contain single method also is called as marker interface. What is functional interface? The interface which contains only one method, that is called functional interface. All of you good in the Java 8? No? Stream API, lambda expression, method reference, optional class, special iterator, and predefined functional interfaces like predicate, consumer, supplier, function. So when you attend any interview, damn sure questions: how to write a lambda expression, how to write functional interfaces, stream API. I have list of employees. Filter the employees based on the salary above 50,000 using stream API. Okay, I will give you employee object. You give me only name of the employee. Like that, n number of questions they are asking on the stream API. That is very, very, very important. Stream API concept is very, very important. Java 21 version is available in the market, but in the industry, 95% of the projects are running on 1.8 only. 1.8 is the biggest release in the Java. Still, 40 to 50% of the Java developers are not clear with the 1.8 features. So it is a little difficult to understand and very, very, very important. Functional programming started in the Java from 1.8. So if you understand that functional programming, then only you will understand reactive programming in the Spring Boot. So we are going to discuss reactive programming in the Spring Boot, which is introduced in Spring 5.x version. To understand that reactive programming, first you need to clear with the functional programming. To get the clarity on the functional programming, you need to understand lambda expressions. So the lambda expression is very important. I will conduct Java 8 classes for core Java people. If anybody is not clear with the Java 8, you can attend for that. Mostly in another 10-15 days, Java 8 will start for them. So at that time, you can attend Java 8 classes if you are not comfortable with the Java 8. Right. So I'm creating one interface here, which is book repository. So this book repository interface is a normal interface as of now. With this interface, I cannot do anything because there is no method, nothing I can do with this interface. This is a marker interface. Now, I want this interface to perform some operations with the table. I want this interface to perform some operations with the table. So for this, I will be extending the properties from CRUD repository. CRUD repository is our interface or it is a JPA interface? It is JPA interface. When we take this CRUD repository, we need to specify generics. That means which entity we need to use to perform the operations. What is the primary key column data type, right? Which is the entity? Book is our entity, which is mapped with a table. What is the primary key data type? Which is integer. So book, our package we need to import. That's it, guys. So with this we are done with our data JPA project creation. Now we need to test our methods are working as expected or not. So JPA will provide some methods to perform the CRUD operations. So here you may get a question. Sir, we created only interface. What about implementation? Implementation is JPA responsibility. We are only responsible to create the interface. Implementation will be provided by the JPA in the runtime by using proxy design pattern. What is that? Proxy design pattern. So internally, our Spring Data JPA will use CGLib libraries in order to create a proxy class for our JPA interface. In that proxy class, implementation will be available for the methods. You no need to implement those methods. You just need to call those methods. So as a programmer, you no need to write the single query also. You no need to write the single method also. Everything will be taken care by data JPA. You just need to call the method. You just need to call that method. Are you clear? Good. Fine. First of all, let us try running our application to see whether application is getting started as expected or not. I have my start class. There is no logic available in the start class. Just main method I am executing. Inside that run method I am calling. Right click, run as boot application. Application started and application stopped. You see here. What is that? What is Hikari CP? In the JDBC I explained connection pooling. Right, by using Hikari CP. Do I need to start that Hikari CP? No. Hikari CP started. Hikari CP pool start completed. Shut down, closing that connection pool. So whenever our application is, can you read this one? When our project is started, if our project contains JPA starter, it is checking for the JPA repositories. Is there any JPA repository available in the project? If JPA repository available, it will identify, it will provide the implementation for that repository interface in the runtime. Connection pool is started, connection pool completed. Can I say it is auto configuration? Am I asking the JPA to create the connection pool? No, by default. Whenever the JPA starter is available, connection pool is created. Which connection pool it is creating? Hikari CP connection pool it is creating. Now I want to insert one record by using repository. Okay, repository is a class or repository is a interface. Can I get the object for the interface? Can IOC create object for the interface? No. Let us see. Context dot get. What is the meaning of context dot get bean? Context dot get bean book repository dot class. What I am doing here? What I am doing here? I'm calling get bean method. What is the meaning of get bean method? What is the meaning of get bean method? It is used to get the bean object from the IOC container. Here I'm asking IOC container to give me repository object. Repository is a class or repository is a interface. Then how IOC will give the interface object? IOC will give the interface object. IOC will give the implementation object for the interface. Is there any implementation class available? Who will provide the implementation? Who will provide the implementation? JPA will provide the implementation. See here, I have one book repository which is an interface. It is extending the properties from CRUD repository. I'm calling context.getBean of book repository.class. So book repository is an interface. Object cannot be created. IOC container will provide implementation object for the repository interface. Right? What is that implementation object class name? I'm printing by using get class dot get name, run as boot application. Can you see this? Can you see the class name? Is it our class? No. Who provided that class? JPA is provided in the runtime. That is called proxy class. So when the interface is created, you no need to provide the implementation for that. JPA will provide the implementation for that interface. Okay. Now, once we got this bean object, I want to insert one record into book table. So insertion with the insert query or with the object. So I'm going to write a insert query and I'm going to write a object to insert the record object. Create the book object. Book B is equal to new book. I'm creating object for entity class B dot now. Go here, call the setters and getters. Write the setters and getters. You can use Lombok. How many of you know Lombok? One person. Project Lombok. 1, 2, 3. So there is a concept called Project Lombok. We will discuss that. So B dot set book ID 101. B dot set book name Java. B dot set book price some value. Right. So I'm able to create one entity object. I'm storing some data into that object. Book B is equal to new book. B dot set book ID, book name, book price. Now I want to insert book record in the table. One object will represent one row in the table. So if I want to insert the record, I need to save the book object. Already I have repository bean dot save of book. Bean dot save of book. So bean is my book repo. Repository dot save method. Save method is used to insert that record into database table. But we have a question. Is my table available in the database? My table not available in the database? My table not available. Now what I am doing? I'm getting repository bean object and I'm saving book object. What is the book object here? Entity class object, which is having data. One entity class object will represent one row in the table. I want to insert one record into table. For that, I have created a book object. I'm setting the data to the book object and I am calling repository.save of book object. It should insert one record into database table. Are you able to follow this? Now, run this program. Run as boot application. See the console. It failed. What is this? It is saying that table does not exist. Boss, you are asking me to insert one record in the table, but that table is not available in the database. I no need to create the table. I will tell to data JPA to create the table. What is that property? Spring dot JPA dot hibernated dot DDL auto is equal to update. I'm telling to data JPA, if a table is not available, don't give the error. Keep silently, you create the table and you insert my record. So in the JDBC, this feature is not available. You need to create the table first, then only you can insert the record. But in the data JPA, I'm telling that if the table is available, you insert that. If table is not available, you create the table and you insert the record into table. What is the proof that JPA creating the table? Let me print queries on the console. Spring.jpa.show SQL is equal to true. So here I'm not writing any SQL query. I'm using methods, right? Internally, JPA will use some SQL queries to communicate with the database, right? What SQL queries it is using? I want to see those SQL queries on the console. To print SQL queries which are generated by the JPA on the console, I'm writing spring.jpa.showSQL. So table creation, record insertion will happen through SQL queries. Which SQL queries our JPA is using? I want to print those queries on the console. For that, I am using show SQL is equal to true. Good. Next one. Check the database before executing the program. Show tables. Any table available? No. Now run this. What is this, guys? Create a table book. So it created one database table. It created one database table. What is this? Select query to check whether record is already available or not. If the record is not available, insert the record into table. So this query is prepared by programmer. This query is prepared by data JPA. This query is prepared by data JPA. As the table is not available, it created the table and inserted our record also into database table. Now go to database and verify show tables. Yes, now can you see book table created? Earlier there is no table in the database, but now book table available. Select star from book. Select a star from book. Now you see one record inserted into database. Right. Am I writing any logic to insert that record into database? Is there any driver concept? Is there any connection, statement, prepared statement, result set, closing the connection? Nothing. Everything taken care by one line of code. With this one line, we can perform CRUD operations with the database. So we have created one interface. Our interface extending the properties from CRUD repository. CRUD repository provided methods to perform CRUD operations. When you create the JPA repository interface, implementation will be provided by JPA in the runtime by using proxy. Good. So look at the steps. What is the first step? Create boot application with below dependencies. So I'm using Oracle database. So that's why, sorry, MySQL database. I'm using MySQL driver. As we want to communicate with the database, we use JPA. That's why I added JPA starter. Then configure data source properties in the properties file. With which database you want to communicate, you need to specify. Then create entity class and map it with the table. Then this is the most important part, creating the repository. What is a repository? What is a repository in the data JPA? It is used to perform operations with the database table. To create the repository, we have two options. One is CRUD repository. Second one is JPA repository. So we extended the properties from CRUD repository, right? When you create a interface, by extending the properties from CRUD repository or JPA repository, JPA will provide the implementation for the interface in the runtime by using proxy. Right. Now, by using our start class, we are able to get the repository bean object. I'm getting the book repository object. It doesn't mean that I'm getting the interface object. When I call book repository object, IOC will identify implementation class. Who provided that implementation? JPA will provide that implementation in the runtime. Once I got that object, I am calling save method. What is the purpose of save method? To insert one record. What is the parameter for the save method? Book object. What is the parameter for the save method? Book object. Book object is used to save the record. So repository.save. So for the save method, we are passing entity object as a parameter. Let me give one more record, 102 AWS some price. Okay, now go to the table and check it. Select a star from book. Currently there is one record available. Now run this application. Run as boot application. Now, what is this? Query I am preparing or JPA preparing? JPA preparing the insert query, and it is intelligent. Before inserting, it is checking record is already available in the table with the same ID. First it is executing a select query, then it is executing a insert query. The reason is this save method, whatever we are calling, this save method is a polymorphic method. That means this method is, in general, this method is called upsert method. This method is called upsert method. Upsert means update plus insert. That is called upsert. Single method which is used for updating the record as well as inserting the record. That's why save method is called as a upsert method. Now you see AWS price available as 2200. Okay, let me go with 103. In 103, I'm using DevOps. The price I'm giving as a 3200. You observe carefully what that method is doing now. So with the 103, do I have any record in the database? With 103, do I have any record in the database? With the given primary key ID, if record is not available, it is going to insert that record. With the given ID, if record is not available, it is going to insert that record. Go to database and check it. 103 record available, DevOps. DevOps price is 3200. Let me change it to 5600. Okay. Same record, just price is modified. Now same method I am calling. Earlier when I execute this program, it inserted the record. Now I am executing the same program just by changing the price. Run this application. Which query is executed now? Why update? With 103 already record available. That is the intelligence, right? So whenever you call the save method, it is checking with the given primary key, record is already available or not. If the record is not available, insert the record. If the record is available, update the record. So the single method is used for updating plus inserting. That's why it is called upsert method. Now go to database, check it. For DevOps, price modified to 5600. Earlier it is 3200. Now it is 5600. So to update the record, to insert the record, which method I am using? Save. So can I call it as a polymorphism? Depends on the situation, its behavior is changing. So with the given ID, if record not available, insert that record. With the given ID, if record already available, based on the primary key. If record is available, update the record. Single method performs update plus insert. That's why it is called upsert method. Are you clear? Now imagine, but remember, when we discussed about JDBC, how much code we have written. We need to load the driver, get the connection, create the statement, execute query, get the result set, convert into object and return the result set, close the connection. 10-15 lines of code you need to write. But here, only one interface. Any logic available in the interface? Just we are creating the interface. With this interface, we can perform all CRUD operations with the database. So in the tomorrow session, we will understand the remaining methods available in the CRUD repository. So as of now, we have used only one method, which is called save method. Now we will see all the remaining methods available in the CRUD repository to understand. Once we get the clarity on the CRUD repository, then we will go for JPA repository. Good. So JPA easy, difficult. What is the purpose of this property? If table is not available, create the table. What is the purpose of this property? Show SQL true. So whatever the queries are printing on the generating by the JPA, you print those queries on the console. Now, as it is a first application, I'm giving the code, guys. So please do the practice before coming to tomorrow's session. Tomorrow we will experiment with all the other methods available, setters and getters. The main part is repository interface. In the start class, we are getting the repository bean object and we are calling the save method. Repository is an interface. It will give the implementation class of that interface. So what about the connection? Who is taking care of the connection? JPA. What about the connection pool? JPA. Who will load the driver? That is completely abstraction for the programmer. What is abstraction? Hiding the unnecessary. I don't know. I don't need that. Whether it is loading the driver or not, is it giving the connection or not, is it creating the statement or not, nothing is required for me. I will just create one repository and I will call the repository method to perform the operation. So I have created a repository by extending the properties from CRUD repository, which is providing several methods. Today I have used one method called save method. That save method is a abstract method. What is the parameter for the save method? Entity object. So which record you want to store into which table, you pass that entity object. Based on the entity class, JPA will understand in which table the record should be inserted, because the class is mapped with the table. Class name is same as table name. So if I pass book object, the record will be inserted to book table. If I pass employee object, it will be inserted to employee table. If I pass student object, inserted to student table. Got it? Any questions? Auto increment, that is generator concept, we will use that. How to generate the value for the primary key by using auto increment, we will discuss that. This is MySQL example, guys. Data JPA example with Oracle. That is the video which I have given in the WhatsApp group. Data JPA with Oracle DB. So you can practice with both databases, guys. If you have both Oracle and MySQL, you can practice with both databases. Only difference is properties file difference will be there. Starter is same, driver will be different. Instead of MySQL driver, you will add Oracle driver. So you can, instead of MySQL URL, you will configure Oracle URL. Remaining things are same. So anyhow, if you want to see that, I have given you a video how to communicate with Oracle database by using Data JPA. Good. Any other questions, anyone? Data JPA is very simple because there is nothing to do. Everything will be taken care by JPA. You just need to call the methods which are available. You need to call the methods in order to perform the operation. No questions? Yeah, fine. Thank you. We'll meet in the tomorrow session, guys. Online students, anybody having any questions? You can unmute.
Yes, sir. So
Yes, sir.
here we are using save method in Spring application.run, right?
Yes.
So in case of this, in project we use in DAO layer, right?
Correct.
And other question I have is that in different packages we have book class, okay? So it will insert the record, right? Without any problem if we have two book classes in our project with different package names, without specifying any table name, it will insert the record.
No, you need to call the repository method, then only it will insert the record, otherwise it will not insert the record. So you mean to say you are creating duplicate repository for the same table?
Yeah.
If you create also, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, sir. Hello.
Yes, sir. Tell me.
Sir, in the public repository class, then sir, so in this one entity class and interface, we have to variable name, primary key variable name. No? So, for suppose our table there is no primary key name, then what will be, sir?
No, nothing will happen, sir. You can have the repository interface, entity class, any package, but you need to follow base package naming convention for that.
Sir, there is no need of SQL queries, no, sir, for Spring Data API.
Currently not required, sir. If you want to write the SQL query, you can do that. I will tell you how to write it.
Okay.
Sir, in a Spring Boot, it's creating its table on its own.
Yes, sir.
Is it the same in Spring JP also?
Correct, sir. JPA also we can do that. In the JPA or in the data JPA in the Hibernate also same thing will happen. If you write that property DDL auto, then table will be created.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, sure.
Hello.
Yeah, hi.
You said when we are using save or this method for this implementation, take care of this.
JPA will take care of the implementation. Yes.
Yeah. Then when for complex query, when we are writing the abstract method.
Custom queries also we can write in the JPA. Once the predefined methods are completed, then I will tell you how to work with the custom queries in the JPA.
Yeah, no, my question is then how it will be give the implementation over there for custom query.
That is what we'll discuss in the class. So you need to write a custom query, implement it. You need to write the query on your own. That query, whatever you write, it will be executed. You don't need to write that query. You don't need to write the implementation for that. You tell to the JPA which query you want to execute.
Yes.
So that the concept is custom query execution in the JPA. So mostly in the next session, we will understand that how to work with the custom queries. Once the predefined methods are completed, then I will talk about find by methods and custom queries in the data JPA.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, Shakta. This is funny. So in data JPA, in an interview yesterday, I faced an interview. They're asking one question regarding this transaction management. If I'm
Yes, sir.
telling
We'll
that,
talk about that.
yeah. What I said, not transaction management will take care of the data JPA. I said,
Okay.
but it is correct or not?
Yeah, yes, that's
Which-
true. That's true.
Yeah, because Hibernate, I know.
You
Yes,
can
yes.
also manage the transactions in the data JPA by using @transactional annotation. I will explain that part.
Yeah, they're asking. Okay, I said.
Yeah.
Hi, sir. Good morning. This is Paul.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah,
Next question.
Sir, we are using the annotations like @entity, @ID. So these
Yes.
all are persistence annotations, right?
Java X.persistence annotations. Correct.
Okay, means the same annotations we can use in the Hibernate as well as Spring or only in Spring?
Those are deprecated, sir. You need to use only persistence annotations.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Hi.
Sir, project ni deployment cheyadaniki em tools use chestar, sir?
Docker, Jenkins, Kubernetes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, Spring Data JPA, we need to go only when the application is interacting with business to business application, right?
Spring Data JPA we need to use when you want to communicate with the database. If you don't want to write the much logic to communicate with the database, then you can go for data JPA.
No. In design point of view and project selection point of view, I'm asking. So if number of users interaction is more, then Spring Data JPA is performance point of view.
Yes, sir. Yes. So in the initial
perfect.
classes itself, I told. So
Yeah.
if you want good performance, then plain JDBC is better. If you want luxury, then data JPA is better.
Okay. Instead of data JPA, we can also go with Spring ORM or Hibernate, right?
Yes,
if you have large applications.
Yes, you can do that.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Good, guys. Thank you. With this, I'm stopping for today. We'll meet in the tomorrow session. Have a great day.